Emma Sarconi is a librarian and book historian, currently working as the reference professional for special collections in the Firestone Library at Princeton University. She's also the chair of the RBMS. So what does RBMS stand for?
Rare Books and Manuscripts section of the American Library Association.
Very good, thank you. So she's the chair of the RBMS Leab Exhibition Awards Committee. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Book and Media Studies from the University of Toronto, a Master's in English from New York University, and a Master's of Library Science from Long Island University. Welcome, Emma, to the Bibliophile.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, we're here to talk about the Leab Exhibition Catalog Awards. Could you just give me a brief idea of what they're all about?
Sure. So the Leab Awards have been around via RBMS for about 20 years. They were started by a pair of avid collectors, Daniel and Katharine Leab, who set up an endowment to support the awards. And every year, the awards committee gathers. The committee is made up of a series of professionals from within RBMS, so librarians, archivists, catalogers, all sorts of folks who are members of the RBMS community. We accept submissions from any institution or body within North America and the Caribbean that has put on an exhibition, and they can send us both their physical catalogs. So I have an example of one here from the American School of Architecture, and they did a beautiful catalog called Renegades, which was about mid-century architectural design in Ohio. We get catalogs, and then we also do online exhibitions. So we review both categories. We have a couple of subcategories. We have a student category now. And yeah, we evaluate the submissions, and then we present the awards to the winners every year.
Very good. Okay. So what I want to look at is the criteria for selection. And the reason I want to do that is because, well, first of all, this area does seem to be a really great possibility for the collector, because these things are beautiful, they're informative, and they're not that expensive to pick up, are they?
They're not. The catalog I was just talking about, I think is about $50 to $60 on the market. They're like a coffee table book.
Yeah, although a lot more of them have soft covers than hard covers, right?
We get both.
But just judging by what I've seen, I'd say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so from the perspective of a collector, of course, collector uses judgment when they decide to pull or not pull the trigger. So that's why, as I say, this criteria is really interesting. But the other thing too is that looking at the criteria and looking at the winners serve as a useful guide to librarians who want to produce stellar exhibition catalogs.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, that these can be a guiding light for other folks who are hoping to, connect with the public via their objects. One of the things I really love about the exhibition catalogs is that they are, and exhibitions in general, is that it's forward facing, it's public facing. So you're really thinking about, how do I take something that I am passionate about, that I understand pretty in depth, and I think that other people should know about. How do I do that in a way that is engaging for other people, that really gets to highlight why I think this is important? And exhibitions really let you do that. And the catalogs can do that too. And people get so creative with them. As I mentioned, that we have subcategories, and one of our subcategories is for pamphlets. So for small design, small little handouts that you would give somebody, not something that's super informative, but a supplement to your catalog all the same, or to your exhibition all the same. The first year I was on the committee, we got a submission of a little booklet for a fly fishing exhibition I am not an outdoors person. I mean,
Mhm.
I camp, but I don't fish. And this was like one of the most delightful, which is not a word you use a lot with exhibition catalogs, let me tell you. But like, it was one of the most delightful little submissions because it had a very tiny lure in it.
A real
Yeah.
thing.
The
Yeah.
booklet was like really beautifully designed. The printing was very high quality, but when you opened it up and got to the center, there was this little tiny actual physical lure. It was
Yeah.
unexpected and it was creative, and it really helped like stoke that seed of curiosity in me, someone who's like not, again, like I'm not interested in
Yeah.
fishing, but this delight that I got from this object really helped me say to myself, wow, I want to know more about what this person has to say about this topic that I previously had no interest in.
Right.
And you can really open that door through exhibition design and exhibition catalog design. That's one of the beautiful things about it. And one of the things that I really hope that the community can continue to think about as they produce catalogs.
So you didn't get hooked then? You didn't physically get.
I did not.
That sounds dangerous.
It was very well secured. It was a very safe little booklet. Okay. Very well done. That was actually from the University of Alberta.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I want to shout out to Robert Desmarais, the librarian there, who actually sent me some of his Leab winning catalogs. So I was so happy to see them. These awards, I'll just kind of read out a little piece here. These awards are given annually, as you say, in recognition of excellence in the publication of catalogs and brochures that accompany exhibitions of library and archival material, as well as for electronic exhibitions of such material. Now, that's an interesting word, accompany, because with bookseller catalogs, and that's a topic also that we've covered and will continue to cover because, again, great collecting area. Their catalogs are designed to sell something. Your catalogs aren't necessarily designed to attract people into the exhibition, are they? They're more a way of, if the exhibition is good, then hey, I want more. I want that catalog. It's kind of reverse, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. The thing about an exhibition is that you can never include all the information that you want to include. It's just too overwhelming for a person. Museum fatigue is a very real phenomena. People get burnt out on a topic, and they just don't have the attention span to really stay with something for as long as you might want them to, or they might want to. So a catalog is a fantastic way to include all of that information that you wouldn't include in the exhibition itself. A lot of our exhibition catalogs include a lot of bibliographic data that would not appear in the exhibit itself. So, the size of an object, the call number, maybe the history of the individual object, because when you're curating a collection, you might be sort of grouping things together. And so you don't pay as much attention to the actual individual thing, depending on how you've designed your exhibit. So a catalog is really, an ability to build on that exhibition, to take that interest that you've already established by bringing people in the door and saying, if you want more, we have a lot more for you, and here you go. So the catalog is doing something very different than a bookseller catalog, because exhibition catalogs are accompanying exhibitions. They're often making an academic argument. They often have academic undertones. They will include academic papers or research. And that's not to say that booksellers don't do a lot of really important research as well, which does make its way into their catalogs in their own way. But exhibition catalogs can be a fantastic resource for the researcher who is hoping to do academic work. I did my undergraduate thesis on commonplace books and commonplacing, the practice of commonplacing, and used a Yale exhibition catalog as one of my foundational sources because they did an exhibition on the process of commonplacing in the 90s. At the time, there wasn't a lot of academic work on commonplacing and commonplace books. And so this was really one of the biggest, most basic resources I could find.
Plus, you got to see a lot of them, I guess. Well, that brings us to one of the key criteria. That the criteria are broken down into content and design. One of the key criteria with content is originality. So why does it have to be original?
The objects that you're looking at don't have to, I mean, they're not necessarily original, but you should be presenting a point of view. You're building on the scholarship, right? Again, I think this is what differentiates an exhibition catalog from a bookseller's catalog. Is it is an academic work, so you shouldn't be recycling an exhibition that maybe has been done somewhere else. Every collection is going to be different. Every curator is taking a different point of view, and your exhibition catalog should reflect that. There are lots of ways in which I think we could see many catalogs, on certain topics like Dickens. I've never seen an exhibition catalog on this, but every university in the United States, I think, who has a special collections could do an exhibition on first edition or early edition of Dickens. And that doesn't really reflect the point of view of the university if you're just doing a first edition roundup. When we're talking about original content, we're talking about point of view. What is your point of view? How is it original? What are you bringing to the table? How are you illuminating these objects in a new light? How are you teaching somebody something that maybe they didn't know before? How are you complicating a topic? That's one of my favorite things to see, is that when people take something that you think you know a lot about already, that you're familiar with, and they really turn it on its head and make you go, oh, I'm seeing this in a whole new light. With the fishing catalogs, with the angling collection, I didn't know a lot about that, but the content, the way in which they were presenting the content felt original. So it doesn't just have to be that your topic is something that no one else has talked about before, but is your point of view unique?
Right. You mentioned that it reflects the university's point of view, but I think what you meant is the curator's point of view, right?
Yeah, curator's point of view, because not all of our submissions come from universities. They come from all sorts of different places. I work at a university, so I tend to get a little myopic about that. But really, whoever is the point of view of whoever is putting on the exhibition, the students who are creating it, the historical society who's putting it on, how is your point of view unique? How are you shedding light on this topic in a way that really reflects what you think is important, what you want people to learn?
It really is reflecting smart thinking, right? Smart thinking that's going to advance the field in a way.
Yeah, that is the hope. That criteria is almost always met. People are very passionate about what they're creating exhibitions around, and they have unique points of view. And so we are, always seeing something that is newly illuminating, that is unique in some way. You can do it with first editions. You can do it with sizing. We've seen exhibition catalogs on, really tiny books. The anniversary for the 20th Amendment for a woman's right to vote. We saw a lot of submissions around that topic, but all of them were from a different point of view. The digital winner this past cycle was from the University of Delaware, who was talking specifically about, how are Delaware women fighting for the right to vote, and was very location specific. So that was, original content. I had never heard the story of Delaware's fight for women's suffrage.
Well, I said advance the field, but I guess what I mean too is there's all sorts of voices and points of view that went unheard, unseen for so long. That would clearly represent originality too, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. This year we did a series of gallery guides from a library in Philadelphia. I will remember which one it is. They did a series of gallery guides on an exhibition they did on Walt Whitman. And these gallery guides just were really fantastic. There were 4 of them, and you got to sort of choose your path. So it was one exhibition, but they had 4 different themes that you could explore within this one exhibition. And one of them was it was about Melville. It wasn't about Whitman, it was about Melville. And one of them was about queer Melville. And that was something that we hadn't seen before in this space, like an exploration of Melville as a queer figure and queer themes in his work, and really allowing the public to learn about that is awesome. And that's a way in which, again, a topic that people feel super familiar with, Melville, I haven't read Moby Dick, but I know about it, right? It's part of our cultural milieu. This was a part of that milieu that I had never explored before, and it was wonderful to be exposed to that.
That puts me in mind, you're saying there's 4 different points of view. It puts me in mind of Lawrence Durrell's Alexandria Quartet.
Oh.
Which is told again from 4 different perspectives, the same story. Okay, so originality of content, subject matter, or again, if it's treated in an original way. So what would be an example of an original subject matter?
This year, one of our winners was a exhibition on, I have trouble pronouncing this name, but Kate Kolowitz, who's a mid-century artist. She worked a lot in pencil and coal, and she was a survivor of, I believe, the Holocaust. She was a German Austrian artist. And so that was a name that I had never heard before. And so I think people have preconceived notions about what an exhibition is going to be on, and what a exhibition catalog, what is appropriate for an exhibition catalog. And so any time in which we're really expanding the bounds of that is something to be celebrated.
It's something that strikes the judges as original?
This is all a very subjective process, right? Which is why we have a committee. It wouldn't be fair for it to be Emma Sarconi decision on Leab Awards, which is also why it's so important that our committee has members who come from different kinds of institutions, do different roles within their institutions. We really rely on the expertise of the people in the room to say, oh yeah, actually, like, my collection has a lot of material on Melville, and we've never thought about this topic, or I'm a cataloger of children's material. So I really know, like, what is going on in conversation around children collecting. And I can say that this is not something I've seen before.
Okay, let's look at number 2, the overall informational content. There should be a sense that the subject is covered adequately for the aims of the exhibition. These aims can be determined partly by looking at intellectual content, which is a bit further down the line. Intellectual content, which is the appropriateness to an intended audience. The catalog text should not be over the heads of this audience or too rudimentary. Considerations are the level of writing and the extent and depth of coverage of the topic. So what are the different types of audiences that catalogs are targeted at then?
Sort of any under the sun. So we had a submission this year that was for children. It was a gallery guide for children, introducing children to how to think about art as really the basics of visual literacy. How do you look at a painting and know what's happening? So that was very much geared for K through 6. If you're putting on an exhibition that is geared towards the general public, it shouldn't be too academic. If you have something that you're hoping will appeal to everybody, then you should be writing at a certain grade level. You should be including certain kinds of information over other kinds of information. There's lots of ways in which the museum field, and I've learned a lot from the museum studies field, as to how you write exhibits for certain kinds of audience. You can't use, really big SAT words or really specific jargony words in an exhibition for a general audience. You're just going to lose them. And again, you really want to foment that spark of curiosity. And it's hard to be curious when you're confused, or you feel like you're being talked down to. And so it's really important for exhibitions to identify their audience and then speak to that audience clearly. Mm-hmm. And with compassion, but identifying the audience can be really hard. Like I said, we see exhibitions that are clearly for an academic setting. They are for people who know what this is. A general audience, I think, is going to have a harder time with something that is really bibliographic. Like I'm a book historian, and I know that my husband's eyes glaze over when sometimes I talk about the really minute, like, well, like I was looking at this book and I thought it was foliated this way, but it was actually foliated this way. He pays attention, but like he's happy, I'm happy. But that kind of conversation about like foliation and how books are made, a general public person, you've got to really start from zero and build up. So an exhibition that's really talking about the nitty gritty of book history or the nitty gritty of material history is more geared towards an audience that comes in with some knowledge.
So they really have to think carefully about some of the key ideas that they want the readers of these catalogs to take away with them then after they've engaged with the catalog.
You can set that intention. People are always going to, you can't necessarily control it, but you should have an intention. And when we're looking at these catalogs, we're just sort of measuring the success of that intention.
Right. So are there any rules about that? Like, okay, we better not have more than one big idea, or more than 5 ideas is just gonna screw people up? Like, are there some rules of thumb here, or?
No, I don't think there are. I think that it's just about threading the needle. Like you can have, I think, a really complex argument that you explain quite well and quite simply so that anybody can understand it. When I complain about literary theory, I don't like literary theory. I struggle with abstract concepts in general. One of my major gripes with someone like Foucault or Derrida is that they write so obliquely that it's like, okay, your ideas are great, but like, I can't understand them. And so do they mean anything? Like what you're writing about is brilliant, but like, you need to write about it in a way that people can understand. And that, for me personally, and this is me speaking as a human, as an individual human, but like for me personally, like that is true brilliance, is when you're able to take something that's complicated and naughty and make it easy to understand and break it down into its parts.
Naughty, not naughty.
But I think the catalogs can really, really accomplish that. So, I would never want to sort of box somebody in to say like, we will not accept anything that's like, too complicated in these ways. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. But when you read something, you should be able to say, I know where this is trying to go and how well it does that. Yeah,
not an exercise in cleverness and showing off, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, you want people to show up because the stuff they have is cool, but if they're writing for a general audience, you got to know how to talk to folks. It is a real art and it's a real skill, and that's what we're trying to do with the awards is really recognize that skill.
So what is the most common criticism that you have of catalogs that are submitted, the most common flaws?
It's hard to say what the most common one is. The one that I can speak to the one I find most frustrating, which is when folks lose sense of their scope. So if you are presenting me with a catalog that is titled something very broad, right? Like novels of 1939, and you are only including novels from America, novels by men, novels by white people, then right, your exhibition should not be claiming to be novels from 1939. It should be claiming to be about white male novels in America in 1939. And so I think that folks can often lose sight of that and don't realize the bias that they're performing when they forget that. And they don't sort of define their subject adequately. So that is something that we've had several conversations about that for various catalogs. I don't have a problem with a catalog about white male authors of novels of 1939, but you got to tell me that's what's happening. You need to be explicit about that, because otherwise you're leaving a lot of people out, and that's not okay. You're not telling the complete story. Yeah, one of the things I find very frustrating is when people don't quite understand the scope of what their exhibition is really doing, and
Okay.
present it like a universal, but it's not.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the criticisms then would be that they aren't specifying clearly enough what it is they're doing.
Yeah, they're not specifying clearly enough what it is they're doing and what it is they're really talking about.
Right. So, I mean, for example, if they'd have said popular novels from 1939, I suppose they could have then said, well, these are the ones that sold the most, and
Yeah.
that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. New York Times bestsellers from 1939. I would have to look at that list, but I think a lot of them are going to be white men. Maybe not. But yeah, if that's your scope, like, you can't do anything about that. Like, that's the scope of your art. That's the scope of your exhibition, right? Like, the New York Times bestseller list in 1939 is what it was. And
Right.
so if you're reflecting that and you're telling that story, I mean, I would like you to point out that there are people who were left off of this list for various reasons, but that's just my point of view. And so you're defining your scope.
Yeah, you're being very explicit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's another criteria under content. It's choice of items. The range displayed must convey a thorough sense of the exhibition's topic.
I think.
What do you mean by that?
I think that speaks again to scope. If you have a very broad topic, French or Italian bindings, right? If you have a whole exhibition on Italian bindings, there's a lot in that bucket. Like, there are a lot of different expressions of Italian bindings. These kinds of exhibitions are very, very common. But if you are, again, only including Italian bindings from a very particular region, Italian bindings from one kind of person, then, you know, you're not showing a lot of originality in the objects that you're picking. There are a lot of different people who have made Italian bindings. There are a lot of different kinds of books that have come out with Italian bindings. When you say Italian bindings, are you fully realizing the variations in that topic? Have you picked enough objects that really speak to the depth of that topic? Are you picking things that are expected, or are you being creative? Are you really thinking in depth about, okay, I want to present on Italian bindings, and what really does that mean, and what kind of people were involved in that process, and what kind of places were involved in that process, and how can I really represent this topic completely and diversely?
That sounds like a bit of a political agenda.
That could be interpreted that way, but I don't think it necessarily has to be. It is about representing what is truly out there. Like I said, there are a lot of different expressions of Italian bindings, and you're putting on an exhibition about that. There are a lot of ways to tell that history. Are you telling it completely, or are you telling it partially? And I think that if you are telling it partially, that is also a political choice. If you are only representing a certain kind of Italian binding, then that is a political choice in and of itself. Because, like I said, there are a lot of different ways in which Italian bindings were made, and you should be telling that complete story if that is what you are hoping to do. If that is what you are telling me you are going to do, then do that. Don't tell me you're telling a full story and then only give me part of that story and try and convince me that that's the full story. That's not acceptable, I guess.
The point that's being made here is that you need to be very careful and precise about the way you use language.
Yes, and very intentional. I think the thing about exhibitions is that they really, because they are public facing and because they often come out of very trusted institutions, the impact that they have on the way in which people understand history and understand culture and understand themselves is extremely high stakes. We know, not to get too into the academia, but like, there's been a lot of academic work done on the ramifications of feeling like you are left out of history. Exhibitions are one way in which people feel that way. that if they don't see themselves in the fabric of history, it can make them feel lesser, it can make them feel unseen. And that's not, for me personally, again, as an individual, that's something that I really struggle with, particularly even as a white woman. Women get left out of history all the time. There is a cost to that. And when you're in a when you're doing something that's public facing, that you are trying to educate the public on a topic, that is something that you have to acknowledge, that there is going to be an impact for this.
Right. You see, it almost sounds like, the exhibitions that even the score are going to be looked upon favorably.
I don't think necessarily. It really depends on the way in which the work happens. I mean, you don't get a free pass for doing an exhibition just about women or another marginalized group. I'm not going to look at a catalog and be like, oh, well, you win. You have to do it well. There are lots of other criteria around, how are your descriptions written? How is your catalog designed? Is it designed well?
Yes, I want to get to the design.
So the content and the conceit of the exhibition is important, but you have to also carry it through. You can't just, like I said, you don't get a free pass on that conceit. You have to do it well, right. And you have to do it thoughtfully, no matter what you're doing. You have to be thoughtful about it. You have to be conscious about the story that you're telling, who you're telling it for, what are the biases that you have or the material has, what is the impact of your work, what do you want people to learn. And I think for any topic, that is really the crux of what we are looking at, are those questions. When you don't ask those questions, and we can tell you don't ask those questions, then things get complicated. But there are lots of criteria, and you don't.
Yes.
I would like to say we are fair in how we evaluate things, and it is an in-depth discussion amongst the committee members. We are always coming back to the criteria. How well does this exhibition do this? Yes, they succeed here. No, they don't succeed here. And it really is a sum of the parts. One thing isn't going to sail you through. It really has to be a complete picture.
Okay, I'll just hit one more of the criteria categories under intellectual content, and that is illustrations. You say that these need not always be present, especially if the catalog is designed primarily to be used with the exhibition and not to be sold. On the other hand, if the subjects need illumination and the meaning, impact, or purpose of the exhibition cannot be understood without illustrations, they should be there. If items are not illustrated, then most significantly are visually arresting, should be chosen for reproduction if they can be photographed. The illustration should not be superfluous graphics that break the monotony of printed columns. They should be clearly germane to the exhibition. Yes.
So that criteria is that we want to make sure that folks are using images well. They know why they're using images. The images are well produced. They're placed well.
Do you have a category illustrated and not illustrated?
No, we don't. But I do also want to say that our committee is on pause this year because of some administrative stuff above us. We're looking at not only the submission criteria, but also the way in which we communicate judging and talk about the criteria. So some of this language, like using the word germane, it makes me laugh because it is so highfalutin.
It's a nice word.
It's a beautiful word. So some of these things like, is there a category for illustrated and not illustrated? No, but that's a great question. Maybe that's something we should explore. A lot of the catalogs we get have some form of visuals included through them, because I think people really see these catalogs as something, they are produced in accordance with a physical exhibit, but they also should stand alone, right? Like they can be these coffee table books that people keep in their homes because they're beautiful objects. And so the design can be very important on that level. as well as supporting the text.
Okay. Just finally, we did touch on contribution to scholarship. Let's, in the time we have remaining, let's look at the catalog design. And originality, again, is now, like, maybe these aren't in order of importance, but it's right at the top too.
Yeah, there are lots of ways in which to do an original design. The little booklet I was talking about with the lore is one of them, but also the series of Melville items that I was talking about as well. That's a very original design. Instead of having one booklet, they had 4. That is an original design choice. Playing with color. Sometimes you'll have folks that play really beautifully with color. I remember we had a Whitman submission a couple years ago that was this really fantastic pink, and it was very memorable. And it stood out among our submissions that year. It was original, right? Like the color pink is not a new color, but for an exhibition catalog, especially an exhibition catalog about a 19th century author, like that feels original. And it was original among the pack that we were looking at that year.
Certainly unexpected.
It was like this bubblegum pink color, which you don't see a lot in the world of exhibitions, especially rare book and special collections exhibitions. It was delightful. For me personally, when I see anything that feels fun, I always like that.
That's your bias. You've got
That is my bias.
Fun bias. The criteria states that the design should not, however, impede the smooth flow of reading, of course, but I like this one. It says it shouldn't either overwhelm the intellectual content.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
I mean, the point of the catalog is to educate and inform, I suppose. And so that should be the primary goal, whatever that means to the catalog. And so if you have a design that is, for example, too busy and it's very hard to read the actual words, that would be a discussion among the committee. Was this overwhelming for you? Did this feel like it was doing justice to its intent, or was it detracting from it? Is the design a compliment? I think is a question that is really worth asking, or is it sort of overwhelming?
That's a similar point. Is that it should be appropriate. The design should be appropriate, not antithetical to the subject matter.
Yeah, I think that you could, if you were making an argument about, I don't know if you could even make this argument, but like if you did a whole exhibit about how Beethoven was the punk rocker of his day, and you had like a Sex Pistols themed exhibition catalog, right? It like looked like the Sex Pistols paraphernalia. That would be appropriate because that is the conceit of your exhibition. But if you're just talking about like Beethoven as a classical composer, and you're looking at maybe his handwritten manuscripts, and that's what the exhibit is about, and you're really focusing on the manuscripts of his life, and you do like the Sex Pistols theme, I would be sort of like, this is weird.
Yes, yeah.
Like, this is an interesting choice. If you're
Right.
not making that argument, if you're not sort of tying those two things together for me, it's unexpected. And again, like for me, I would take that to the committee and I would be like, how do people feel about this design? Like, do you all think that it's complementing this topic well, or did you find it jarring? I found it jarring. It's always a conversation. I am the chair of the committee, but I am not the arbiter of what is right or wrong.
No. Next point is effectiveness of design. Design should work in practical as well as aesthetic terms. So what do you mean by that?
I think that comes back to what I was saying earlier, is the design interfering with legibility. If you are describing very in-depth a binding or an illustration and you do not include a visual of that could be hard. If you don't arrange them well, so if the image of the thing that you're talking about comes 5 pages after you're talking about it, then that can be jarring and interrupt the flow of reading. So those kinds of things are the concern there.
Okay, and then you mentioned typography, margins, typeface, choice of colors, and inking are all considerations. What do you mean by that?
Basic composition. So are the margins on your page appropriate? I can't think of an exhibition catalog where we specifically had a conversation about the margins, but I've seen novels printed where the margins are quite small and it can be very strange. This is about basic composition. If you have more than 2 typefaces on a page, that can be challenging for the reader. This gets more into the nitty-gritty of graphic design. And if you have somebody who is composing your exhibition catalog, they're the kind of person who would be able to make sure all of these things happen.
Right. But again, it's in terms of me being a collector and saying, well, that's good or that's not good.
Sure. I mean, I think that
what should I, like, what criteria should I use?
What I would do is I would find a guide. There is information about like how to design a page that makes it legible. What should the margins look like? How many typefaces should you have on the page? There are rules that graphic designers go by in order to design something. And so
the golden rule, or like accepted practice, is that what you mean?
Yeah, accepted practice. I think it's also the kind of thing, because a lot of folks are readers, and if you're a collector, you're looking at visual material all the time. You sort of know when something is weird. If a exhibition design has margins that are too small or the bleed is wrong, you can look at that, as anybody can look at that and say, like, there's something off here. This doesn't look like what I'm expecting it to look like. And so you can take that and say, I don't know if this design works. I don't think you need to have the specific language to speak to how it doesn't work, but you know that it doesn't quite work the way in which they've presented it. People know when they're confused. They know when they're losing interest. Sometimes that can come from design choices. They talk about in film, if you step out of a movie, so if you're watching a movie and you get distracted by something in the movie, they've actually lost you like 2 minutes earlier, because the way in which they immerse you has to keep going. Even if they misstep in that, then you're already tumbling. I think when you look at something or you're reading something and you're like, wow, I'm really like, it's not catching me, design can be a part of that. Content can too, obviously, but design can contribute to that. So I think that if you are, as a collector, looking at a catalog and trying to assess it for how well it's designed, that's going to be, I think, a really personal choice in some ways. Yes.
And the same holds true of the last criteria you've got here, and that's the quality of the reproduction.
Yeah. And that I think actually is easier to identify, because you know when an image is done poorly. You know when it's really pixelated or blurry. That's super easy to identify. That's actually the easiest criteria for me to identify when I'm evaluating these books is, are these images crisp? And if they're not, right, we've got a problem.
Or if they aren't crisp, they should be uncrisp for a reason.
Yes, exactly. You can have a blurry image, but please, have there be a reason for it. If it's just that your photography is poor, like that, I'm sorry, like we've got an issue there. One of the things we struggle with in the award is that we want to make sure that it's accessible. So like anybody who is creating a document, an exhibition and a accompanying publication feels welcome to submit. And so that's why we award based on cost of the book. That's one of the way we've tried to get around this, is that
that's right.
If you're producing a coffee table book, you're putting a lot of money into that. And that should be recognized. And it means that you might have more resources to hire a graphic designer. But if you're producing a gallery guide or a pamphlet or a booklet, you probably don't have the same amount of resources as the institution or the person that's creating the coffee table book. And so, we've really tried to recognize that discrepancy. It's not fair to hold those two different kinds of publications against one another. They're just on different playing fields. We really are constantly thinking about new ways in which to recognize how folks are producing work with the resources that they have, because the whole point of the award is to generate excitement around exhibitions, generate conversation around exhibitions, generate creativity around exhibitions and curiosity. And so we don't want to leave anybody out of that conversation. You shouldn't.
You mean the catalogs?
Yeah, the catalogs, and then the exhibitions themselves, right? Because
okay,
it's very hard. We evaluate catalogs and we evaluate digital exhibitions because we cannot see physical exhibitions. We're a volunteer committee, we cannot go and visit the physical exhibitions for everybody we get a catalog from. And so we look at the catalogs instead, but that means that you have to be able to produce a catalog, have the time to do that. So it's something that the committee is always sort of grappling with.
I was going to say, because you are at a bit of a disadvantage because you do want to see both, ideally, correct?
I would actually love to be evaluating exhibitions. And if we added a third category in my dream world, we would have the actual exhibitions and then the catalogs and then the digital. But we could not do the physical exhibitions. It's just too hard. We're thinking about other ways in which we can try and come up with a solution in that realm, but it's really difficult.
The real key here is the relationship between the original exhibition and the catalog and comparing and contrasting, right?
Yes, and that is the conversation I would love to be having, but it's too difficult to get to the actual physical exhibitions. We're left with the catalogs themselves.
Well, speaking of the catalogs themselves, I just want to end up with this. Now, this one I'm looking at is called All Under Heaven.
Okay, yeah.
It is from the University of Alberta, Field Special Collections. And this is a winner, right?
Yes, I think it is. I think that was for before my time, but yes.
Okay, because when I opened it up, I'm trying to think here, I saw this. Can you see that?
Okay, yes, I can see that.
It really was like walking into an exhibition that I actually remember as being one of the most striking I've ever seen. That color, that's what pulled up another exhibition, right? But it did for a moment take my breath away because it was such a wow opening that page. So my question to you then is, what are some of the catalogs specifically that you recall that took the breath away from all of the members of the committee so that us collectors can go check them out?
Well, I've already mentioned the gallery guides. I think that from a practitioner point of view, we were very impressed.
Just for our listeners, I can edit this. If you want to take a minute and just think about 3 or 4. Yeah,
let me look at I have
sure.
all of this in a spreadsheet. So.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Of course you do.
I am a librarian.
But what was that one you were talking about then?
Yeah, that was the 4.
And what's that called?
Let me grab it.
It puts me in mind of the Bibliomania one at the Beinecke.
That was one I was going to mention. The series of Bibliomania booklets was really impressive.
And they had a little band around them, right?
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
Those were pretty stunning. So this was called Chart Your Own Voyage, Gallery Guides from the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia.
The great bookseller, the doctor. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The committee said about those, they were awarded both the winner of the brochure category this year, and we also awarded them an honorable mention in the innovation category, because the conceit, they were both very well executed, and then the conceit itself we thought warranted extra attention. They were 3 sort of trifold panels, and they had about 5 objects each, And so each topic would highlight different objects.
Is this the one you're talking about, where there's 4 different perspectives?
Yeah.
Okay, so what else?
That one was pretty striking. The Bibliomania the other year was pretty striking. The pink book that I was talking about earlier was a Melville exhibition that was really beautifully done. The Huntington did a celebration of an anniversary, and we see a lot of those. That is, again, that's the kind of topic that comes up over and over and over again. And the way in which they approached it and the design of that catalog was so good. It was striking and beautiful and playful. That was one of those that felt very innovative, even though they were doing a topic that, again, we had seen before. A celebration of a centenary is very common. And so to have it feel so new felt like such an accomplishment for them. And then the Whitman, the book that was pink, is called Poet of the Body, and it was done by the Grolier Club. Okay,
good. And that, again, got across the board raves, is that it?
I remember everybody really liking that one.
Okay. I know that the Grolier Club is often there. Beinecke's often there. And in fact, the University of Alberta, Bruce Peel is there a lot.
Yes.
Any others that seem to make a common appearance?
This year was extraordinary because, one, I think that the pandemic interrupted a lot of this work. So a lot of exhibitions were on hold, which means we didn't hear from a lot of the folks that we normally hear from. So this year was extraordinary. But yeah, University of Alberta, we usually get something from University of Guelph. The Canadians actually really like to submit for the exhibition awards, which is very nice.
Well, if we can get praise from an American organization, we're in seventh heaven.
So the Canadians show up. We will occasionally get things from Harvard, but the exhibition awards, another conversation that we're having with this pause, is really about how to reach a lot more exhibition catalog producers.
You want to bump up your submissions and get a more diverse.
We just want more participation. There are lots of institutions that I know are producing exhibits, and I'm not going to put any of them on the spot, but that are producing exhibitions, and we don't hear from them. And they're
maybe they don't care about awards, though. Maybe that's another thing. You're getting a sample of people who really care about getting awards.
I think I've never met a person who doesn't care about an award. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think especially for the digital ones, that is a realm that I would really like to see more participation in, because I know a lot of folks are creating digital exhibitions, and they're creating beautiful digital exhibitions, and we're just not hearing from them. And so I have to wonder, like, are they not submitting because the process is too complicated, or are they not submitting because they don't know we exist, or they don't care, and we have to sort of make the case for why this is important, because those are everlasting, right? And anybody can access them, and so you would think that they would want the publicity. We're really trying to improve the program and make it really accessible for anybody. Like I said, we really just want anybody who's passionate about exhibitions, who's passionate about a topic, who creates an exhibition, who creates a catalog or a brochure, send it on over to us. We want to see it.
How do they do that? What's your website address?
There's a submission form that is getting redone. If you Google RBMS Exhibition Awards, it's the first hit. And you can also contact me, Emma Sarconi, at Princeton, for more information. I'm happy to pass on whatever you need to know. We are currently, as I mentioned several times, on this year we are paused, but next year we will be accepting submissions for the 2-year cycle. So we will still, anything that's being produced now will still be accepted in the next cycle. So
when's the next cycle?
In a year. We'll be soliciting submissions next October for review in January.
And that'll take in the previous 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. So they can all listen to our podcast, improve their catalogs or maintain their high quality and get praised for it if they send them to you.
Absolutely. And I love looking at them. So if anybody can give me more to do, that's great. I don't have enough. I have a lot of things to do, but I'm always happy to look at the exhibition catalogs. It's something that I really enjoy.
I can't believe you don't collect them.
I know.
I guess you get them all at work though, so.
I do. Yeah. I just don't collect for myself.
I see. Okay.
So yeah.
Well, for those who do collect for themselves, I think this has been very useful.
Good.
I hope that they can put what we've talked about to good use.
I hope so too. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated this conversation. And I hope that if folks have questions about the awards, they can either find us online or reach out. And I'm happy to provide more information.
That's great. Thank you so much, Emma.